fairly drab, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle for some as well. That's being caused by this rippling, wiggling weather fronts that's kind of grinding to a halt through the rest of today over the Midlands, parts of South Wales and East Anglia. So some outbreaks of rain likely here. The far southeast may see a little bit of brightness, but much of the southern half of the UK covered in cloud. Brighter skies for northern England, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. In the far northwest, though, it is windy, and there will be a few showers coming in here, particularly over the Highlands. Temperatures across the north, 10, 11 at best with a bit of sunshine. It is pretty mild further south, 15, 16 in the London area, but it doesn't feel all that mild if you're stuck under that weather front and the cloud, rain and drizzle, which will continue on and off through the evening to push into parts of East Anglia, maybe down towards the southeast before tending to fizzle out. Another band of showery rain across northern Scotland. Otherwise largely dry, and some fog is likely. It could be quite thick through the early hours over parts of northern England, North Wales, southern Scotland, where things will turn quite chilly. Again, it will stay pretty mild overnight across the south. So another mild day here. Again, predominantly cloudy across the south. There'll be the odd shower coming into North Wales later, maybe southwest Scotland, northwest England, but some brightness likely across eastern areas. A bit of sunshine, but generally fairly cloudy. The breeze starting to strengthen, and notice behind me there are further bands of rain. That's tied into an area of low pressure that's going to bring more persistent rain across the country during Thursday evening and into Friday, and it will increase the winds as well. So that area of low pressure really will dominate from Thursday night onwards, bringing, as I say, a spell of wet and windy weather for most, coming in and then kind of fizzling out. So it turns drier through Saturday, and at the moment Sunday looks dry for much of the UK. Bye for now.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
It's 3 o'clock. This is GB News and the briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey. Coming up in the next hour, the Tory sleaze. Well, it slides into day 11, and the second job scandal for MPs. We'll be looking at that. Vaccine passports in Wales to be expanded from Monday. We'll be debating whether it's the right thing to do. And the Foreign Secretary's condemned a protest against the Israeli ambassador on a UK campus as an attack on free speech. That and much more. But first, the news on the hour with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date at 3 o'clock.
A survivor of child sexual exploitation is calling for the resignations of the Rotherham Council leader and the South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner. Well, it comes after GB News revealed up to 1,600 risk assessments have been carried out on children considered vulnerable to grooming in the borough since 2017. Rotherham Council is now holding a meeting to discuss child sexual abuse in the town. A survivor who spoke to GB News is demanding action.
It's a despicable behaviour when we're speaking about children being abused, and I think that has come from Councillor Chris Reid and Alan Billings. If they're incapable of protecting the people and the children of this town, they need to do the right thing and walk away.
South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner Alan Billings says he's invited the survivor to meet police teams working on child sexual exploitation to help them better understand grooming. And the leader of Rotherham Council, Chris Reid, says he has the deepest of respect for her and her views. Now, Lord Frost has told Parliament talks with the EU over the Northern Ireland Protocol are ongoing. The Brexit minister reassured the House of Lords he would not give up on the process until it is abundantly clear that nothing more can be done. The Tory frontbencher says the EU needs to remain proportionate in its negotiations.
My Lords, I gently suggest that our European friends should stay calm and keep things in proportion. They might remind themselves that no government and no country has a greater interest in stability and security in Northern Ireland and in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement than this government. We're hardly likely to proceed in a way that puts all that at risk.
Sir Geoffrey Cox, who's been accused of misusing his office for a second job, says he doesn't believe he's broken parliamentary rules. Labour has called for a standards investigation after an image appeared to show the Tory MP carrying out private work for the British Virgin Islands inquiry from his Westminster office. The Deputy Labour leader, Angela Rayner, says the actions seem to be a brazen breach of the rules. Border Force vessels are involved in multiple rescue operations in the English Channel. GB News has been told they're dealing with up to 10 separate incidents. That's after another 10 small boats were intercepted this morning. Yesterday, more than 500 people were found in UK waters. From Monday, people in Wales will need to show a COVID pass to go to the cinema, the theatre and a concert hall. Protesters have been demonstrating against the extended measures. Currently in Wales, you need proof of full vaccination or a negative COVID test result to get into nightclubs and large events.
Come to Cardiff today to make my voices heard, to actually have solidarity with people in Wales, to say it's absolutely unacceptable that there should be any vaccine passports. The last vote at the Senate should not have gone through. It was a draw, 28-28. It went through on a technical hitch. Now we're faced with them being extended to different venues across Wales.
Russia has sent 2 bomber planes to patrol Belarusian airspace at its border with Poland. German Chancellor Angela Merkel asked President Vladimir Putin to intervene over the migrant surge at the border. Putin has blamed the EU for escalating the situation, saying they're trying to strangle Belarus by blocking the border. The Russian president told the German Chancellor that the EU should discuss the crisis directly with Belarus. Negotiators from nearly 200 countries are scrutinising a first draft of the COP26 agreement, hoping to strike a deal before the summit ends on Friday. Well, the Prime Minister has returned to the conference in Glasgow, which is shifting its focus today to transport and low-carbon travel. The draft, published this morning, is urging nations to revisit and strengthen their emissions targets for 2030 so that global warming is limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Sir Elton John has been honoured by the Prince of Wales for his career in music and campaigning work on AIDS. The musician received an Order of the Companions of Honour, recognising 5 decades spent in the spotlight, plus his action on HIV. Sir David Attenborough and Dame Judi Dench also received the award.
Raring to go, and I've got a lot more work to do as far as my life goes. So this is just a reminder, I think, that there's more to do, more work to do for music, more work to do for charity. And life is great. I'm so lucky.
You are up to date. We'll keep you up to date every half hour here on GB News.
What a legend Elton John is there receiving that award. Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Briefing PM here on GB News. This is your fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis. I'm Darren McCaffrey, and here's what is coming up over the next hour. As we've just been hearing in the news there, vaccine passes and vaccine mandates. They're about to be extended in Wales. We'll speak to a Welsh Assembly member who voted against the expansion of the vaccine pass system on Monday and talk to a group who've launched action against the Welsh Government. We'll also bring you the latest, of course, on the Tory sleaze scandal. And we'll head to Shropshire, where campaigning has already begun in Owen Paterson's former seat ahead of the upcoming by-election. We'll be speaking to one of the candidates. And the Israeli ambassador was chased off the campus of the London School of Economics last night. The Foreign Secretary has condemned it as an attack on free speech. We'll be speaking to the CEO of a campaign against anti-Semitism. And as always on the briefing, we want to know what you've got to say. Do get in touch with your views and opinions. You can email me, you know the email address by now, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me @gbnews. Thank you for joining me this Wednesday afternoon. Welcome to the programme. This is The Briefing. Well, we're going to start with the top story, which is that the Conservative MP, Sir Geoffrey Cox, has said he did not break parliamentary rules by carrying out paid legal work in his House of Commons office. The ex-Attorney General, who's made almost £900,000 in the past year as a barrister, apparently took part in a virtual meeting on the 14th of September. Now, MPs cannot use public resources, including parliamentary offices, for personal or financial benefit. Labour has referred this case to the Independent Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards. It is something that almost certainly the Prime Minister is going to be asked about this afternoon. He's due to hold a press conference in just over an hour's time. He is in Glasgow at COP26, and so is our political correspondent Tom Harwood, who joins me from there. Good afternoon to you, Tom. The Prime Minister may want to talk about the negotiations there in Glasgow, but undoubtedly he is going to get hounded over these questions about Geoffrey Cox. It is getting quite tricky for the PM, isn't it?
It certainly is. Battles on all fronts. He's dashed up to Glasgow today because COP26, at least the negotiations, appear to not be going as smoothly as at first was anticipated. Reports now saying that the planet is heading for 2.4 degrees warming rather than the 1.5 he's striving for. A pretty big difference there. The Prime Minister coming up here to clearly try and chivvy on those talks. Will he be able to do it? Not so certainly. Yet, of course, at this press conference, one thing will dominate, the thing that has been dominating the front pages for the last 3 days, and this is these repeated allegations of sleaze and scandal within the Parliamentary Conservative Party. Of course, Geoffrey Cox denies that he has done anything wrong. It's perfectly legal to have a second job while you're an MP. It's perfectly fine to work, for example, as a lawyer, as Geoffrey Cox has done. He's a distinguished QC. The issue that has been brought to the fore here is that he may have been doing work within his parliamentary office, and that is more of a grey area.
Indeed it is, and that's why Labour have reported, isn't it, Tom, to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards, because they think this is something that Owen Paterson was originally pulled up on as well. And in many ways, you do get the sense that Labour scented blood in all of this to a degree. They feel that they've got a case against Geoffrey Cox.
I think that they certainly were on to something at the start of last week. Indeed, the middle and the end of last week, as really there seemed to be this new narrative that was more cohesive than previous accusations against the Conservative Party for cash for mates and sleaze. At the height of the pandemic, I think most of the country understood that the government was scrabbling around to find anyone they knew at all, to provide them PPE, to provide them services for tests and all the rest of it. That, I think, was to some extent forgiven at the height of the pandemic. Where it seems to be less forgiven is that we're now sort of out of the worst of that. We're seeing cases falling in 3 out of the 4 countries of the United Kingdom. Pretty considerable case falls in England. People can see that the pandemic may be receding behind us, and that's when the scrutiny really turns to the government, and they can't so easily bat away those accusations. Although Keir Starmer may have gone a little bit bit too far. Where it's a pretty clear-cut issue of taking money from companies to lobby ministers, taking money to provide a service as a QC, or taking money to advise other companies, as for example the leader of the Lib Dems, Sir Ed Davey, does, or indeed taking money to act as a lawyer, as Keir Starmer has done while he's been an MP in the past, taking over £100,000 since he's become an MP. This starts to muddy the waters, and it means that less of a microscope is on the Conservative Party, because second jobs as a whole, that big wide issue, is something that affects all parties. So potentially the Labour Party would have been more onto a winner if they'd continued to focus on those allegations of sleaze, of lobbying specifically, not of opening up to the work that Geoffrey Cox does as a QC.
OK, Tom, appreciate your thoughts this afternoon. Tom Harwood, who is there in Glasgow for COP26, and we'll, of course, be bringing you that press conference from the Prime Minister. I think it's due to start around 4:30 this afternoon, live coverage here on GB News. Now, of course, one of the reasons that we and the Conservative Party, I should say, are finding themselves in this very difficult patch is because of the resignation of Owen Paterson, which sparked off, it must be said, all these newspaper headlines that have led to other investigations into other MPs, certainly by journalists in Westminster. Owen Paterson stepping down from his seat in that bombshell letter he sent at the end of last week. It has sparked a by-election in his North Shropshire constituency, which I think is due to be held just before Christmas. And joining me now is actually Reform UK's prospective parliamentary candidate in the seat, Kirsty Walensee. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I suppose, first of all, I just want to touch upon the fact I think that you used to work for Owen Paterson in the past. It's clearly been a very difficult time for him on a personal level, but many would say he kind of brought about his own downfall, not least of all in reaction to some of the government's actions last week, still trying to defend himself when, frankly, many of his colleagues concluded that he'd done wrong.
Yes, firstly, thank you very much for having me on the show today. I did work for Owen Paterson, although it seems like it was a lifetime ago now. I think Owen Paterson has been through an awful lot over the past couple of years. There's part of me that's, sympathetic for what he's gone through. There's a human side to the story as well. However, I do not agree with MPs taking paid consultancy work. I think the parliamentary system needs reviewing, and I think taking paid consultancy is a conflict of interest to the job of representing the people.
So you're standing for Reform UK. Just give us a sense of what platform, what are you offering the voters of Shropshire?
OK, well, I think the government has taken the people of North Shropshire for granted for far too long. I feel let down and disappointed by the government. I feel really let down with everything that's happened recently. I was born in North Shropshire, brought up here, I live here. This is my hometown, my home constituency. And I really understand the issues that affect people. I think Reform UK is different. One of the things that makes us unique is that as a Reform UK MP, I would never be forced or pressurised or coerced in voting for the party interest or along party lines, as we've recently seen in the government debacle. I would always be free to vote first and foremost for my constituents and for what matters to them.
What would be seen as a good result for you next month when the election happens?
Well, it's an interesting by-election because whilst this has always been considered a safe Conservative seat, obviously people are feeling very disappointed and disheartened with the government. I personally used to be a Conservative voter but feel disenfranchised and let down. And that's why I'm with Reform UK. And I think more and more people are going to be coming around to that way of thinking. At the moment, we're going up in the polls. It's all very positive. We've also got a by-election going on in Old Bexley and Sidcup with our leader, Richard Tice standing, and the results that we're getting from
going up in the polls. The reason I asked that question, of course, is because I think nationally you're about 4% of the polls. If you get less than 5, you'll lose your deposit. it's entirely possible you might well lose your deposit, isn't it?
Well, I don't think that's going to happen here. I really have got a lot of local support. I've had lots of people getting in touch with me and saying lots of positive things, and lots of Conservatives on the ground. And I know that people across the country will be finding the same thing. When you speak to traditional Conservative voters, they're going to find it really difficult to put their cross next to the Conservative Party this time. What I would say to the people of North Shropshire is you can vote Conservative again and endorse the appalling behaviour of the government, or you can vote for me and you can vote for something different. You can vote for someone that can stand up for what you want in Parliament.
Okay, well, we'll see how that works out and what the people respond next month, indeed. Kirsty, thank you very much indeed. Kirsty Walmsley there, who is standing as the Reform's prospective parliamentary candidate in North Shropshire. Let's go now to Kevin Maguire, talk about the wider politics of all of this. Of course, associate editor of the Mirror newspaper. Good afternoon to you, Kevin. Labour really think they're onto something here, don't they, with Geoffrey Cox? We're on to day 11, I think, of bad headlines around so-called Tory sleaze, and they potentially think that they might have another scalp, another by-election, because they think he may well have broken the rules, even though he denies it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can't see how he hasn't broken the rules if he's used his office to do a call with the British Virgin Islands and the Caribbean for his outside work as a lawyer. It looks open and shut to me, so it'll be a very, very interesting case. But no, Labour think he's onto something, but so do many Tory MPs think Labour are onto something, because it was a disastrous decision by Boris Johnson to actually try and protect Owen Paterson, who was as guilty as sin, and change the rules to protect one of his own. And many of those Conservative MPs bitterly regret being whipped and coerced into voting for something they didn't believe in. And there is no end to this now, because there is so much a back history, so many entries in the Register of Members' Interests, which in this climate can look very iffy and very dodgy. The Prime Minister's policy at the moment seems to be one, run away to COP in Glasgow. He's gone up there earlier than expected, was thought to be going up the weekend. He's on a day trip today, hoping to shift the agenda. Two, hoping it'll just run out of steam, the whole sleaze issue, because of course Parliament's into recess. And thirdly, there'll be an attempt by the Conservatives, we've seen it already really, to try and tar some of the Labour MPs, including Keir Starmer, with the same brush. The problem is it's seen as Tory sleaze because of the Owen Paterson affair.
In saying that, Kevin, you and I have been around long enough to know that sometimes actually on politics, and we don't know whether he's broken the rules or not, and of course there will be a decision made by that, given the fact it's now been investigated. It's also how it's perceived by the public. And frankly, even though Geoffrey Cox says he works, 70-hour weeks, I mean, going to work in the British Virgin Islands, when people couldn't go on holiday, also using the parliamentary estate to also, it must be said, to defend the British Virgin Islands, who have been taken on an illegal case by his own government. It is quite extraordinary, this story.
It is. It is absolutely extraordinary. Geoffrey Cox says he wasn't defending the British Virgin Islands in this taxation corruption case brought by the UK government. He was trying to get justice, but he's trying to get very well-paid justice by himself. But it is perception. People will look at it and think, yeah, maybe I don't mind if an MP has another job. But then you will think, how much has he earned? What, nearly £1 million in a year? Look, is a lawyer first and an MP second, is what they will say. And there he was out in the Caribbean and voting remotely over the internet on issues that affect people here in the UK. How can he look after his constituents in Torridge and West Devon? They will rightly ask. No, it's an incredible case, and you can see his colleagues are distancing themselves from him. Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, did so today. Others will be doing the same, because that is just such an enormous amount of money. The rules are quite clear. You cannot use your office or any parliamentary resources at all to pursue your own financial interests. Catherine Stone, the Standards Commissioner, will investigate. He denies he says he believes he hasn't broken the rules. Let's see, and then let's see too if a suspension results.
And just very finally, Kevin, you touched upon it earlier. The Prime Minister does seem to, by his actions last week, have opened this kind of Pandora's box, really, for actually quite senior Conservative MPs who do hold these second jobs, often consulting jobs. Do you reckon what's the sense of the mood amongst Conservative MPs is probably what I'm trying to get at here, particularly some of those senior kind of old school Conservative MPs who might be quite annoyed that they might be about to be stripped of very lucrative second jobs?
Yeah, it's got to be said, Darren, that some of those older traditional Tory MPs were also backing Owen Paterson. People like Ian Duncan-Smith, who's on the front page of The Guardian today, over 25,000 he got from a company which benefited from a reform he recommended when he was on a deregulation committee. But I think the general mood in the Conservative Party is that they feel let down. Most Tory MPs feel let down, and Boris Johnson didn't show good judgment or leadership, and not appearing in the House of Commons on Monday to either take his medicine, his punishment, or lead a fight back, did leave a vacuum. There was even an empty seat on the front bench, which should have been his. He could fly back by private jet from Glasgow the previous week to go to a private dinner in London. But when he was visiting a hospital up in Northumberland, he wanted to get the train back so he could miss the debate. I think he has opened Pandora's box, as you say, and the problem with the Pandora's box, if you're Boris Johnson, is you can't shut it and put it all back in.
Well, we're going to see, as you say, this is going to run, isn't it, Kevin? Thank you very much indeed, Kevin McGuire there from the Mirror newspaper. OK, we're going to pause on GB News, the briefing this afternoon. Up next, we've got Mark White in the studio talking about migrants. They continue to cross on those small boats in the Channel, even in November. And also debating vaccine passports going to be extended in Wales. Good idea or not? Get in touch. Let me know your views. But first, let's cross over to the Met Office, down in Exeter, for the very latest weather on what is a pretty damp day, it seems, across most of the country. Here is the latest this Wednesday afternoon.
Hello again. Most will have a dry day tomorrow. A fairly grey start, some thick fog in places, but it should clear, and generally skies brightening up before things then turn wet and windy tomorrow night and on Friday. Now that is going to come courtesy of this area of low pressure developing at the moment out in the Atlantic. But ahead of that, we've got a couple of weak weather fronts, one continuing to bring damp and drizzly conditions to the evening over South Wales and parts of the Midlands, and another one bringing some showery rain across northern Scotland, where it's also very blustery. Elsewhere, the winds are light, and that will allow some mist and fog patches to form, particularly over parts of northern England and North Wales. A bit of a chilly one across northern Britain. A touch of frost is just about possible in rural areas, but we're a long way from a frost in the south. A mild start to Armistice Day here. It will be a fairly grey start, however. Now, there will be a little bit of showery rain here and there through the day, mostly in parts of the west, but many places will stay dry, and we should see some brightening of the skies, particularly in the east, a bit of sunshine as possible. The breeze will be picking up in the west, and it is still fairly mild, with temperatures in places getting into the mid-teens. It's through the evening we'll start to see significant change as wet and windy weather sweeps initially across Northern Ireland, then into western Scotland, and then these bands of rain will sweep across most areas during the course of Friday. The winds are picking up all the time as well. You can see that low pressure there, the swirl with the wind and the rain. Parts to the east may not see too much in the way of rainfall, but there will eventually be showers across all parts. And southern Scotland, northern England, North Wales look like being particularly wet on Friday, along with the Northern Isles. And it will be blustery wherever you are. That low pressure then bringing a wet and windy spell for Friday, but it tends to ease off and things turn drier as we go through the weekend. Bye for now.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK, the world, and our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We're here for you. Don't forget to join our community by hitting the subscribe button.
And download the GB News app so you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you. Email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
Very welcome back to the briefing, coming up to 3:30 on this Wednesday afternoon. Thank you for your company. Now, it may be November, but there is another significant wave of small boats coming across the English Channel today. We saw similar scenes yesterday, but I believe today around 10 boats have been intercepted so far. For the very latest, our Home Affairs and Security Editor Mark White is with us. Good afternoon to you, Mark. It is November. This is certainly not typical of previous years. What's going on?
Well, they're still coming because there is a very significant influx of people into northwest France along Calais and Dunkirk and Boulogne. You can see this is the first. So you mentioned 10 boats. That was 10 boats this morning, but in the last few hours there have been more ongoing incidents in the Channel with at least another 10 boats being intercepted, and actually more than Border Force can cope with. So the RNLI, the lifeboats from Dover, Ramsgate, Walmer and Dungeness have all been out. And to say they've been busy is an understatement. They are volunteers, of course, on the lifeboats, but they've been handling back-to-back calls of late, dealing with what is an intensifying crisis. It was, of course, bad during the summer in those warm months, but now no let-up at all, even though we are into the winter months where, OK, it seems relatively calm when you look out into the English Channel, but it can whip up in an instant out there. There are strong currents, of course, in the Channel. It's a very busy shipping lane with wakes from boats. It is very hazardous, and we know that people have died. Just on Monday, French authorities reported another migrant death, someone that was spotted by a fishing boat floating in the water near Le Havre. So clearly, a great deal of concern about
what do we think is, the numbers we know are significantly up this year, but no one, I don't think, expected it really to, and these are the boats involved, go into November. Is it because the French authorities aren't keeping up, as the British would say, their end of the bargain? Is it simply because there are more migrants? Numbers weren't particularly high last year because of the coronavirus crisis. What do we think is at play? Why the large numbers this year?
There are certainly more migrants. A local politician in Calais was saying that there is simply an uncalculable amount of migrants in that area of northwest France at the moment. And the reason they're coming is because they have seen from images on their screen, from word of mouth back through the people smugglers, that this is an effective route for getting into the UK. As long as you can get out onto the channel in this boat and you're not immediately turned back by the French just on the shoreline there, then the chances are you're going to get into mid-channel and you'll be picked up by UK authorities, and then you enter the asylum system as 90%, 99% of those who are picked up do then claim asylum, and they enter that system.
And just finally, politically, it's really interesting, isn't this? There's an awful lot of criticism for Priti Patel that she's not doing enough. But at the same time, it's not really, there's an awful lot of politics around at the moment, so it's not really hitting home to a degree. At what point does this become really quite tricky for the Home Secretary? At what point do what some frankly would say are the excuses about why this can't be tackled properly simply will kind of not be enough?
Well, I think it is a situation and an issue that does resonate with people across the country. There have been surveys that have showed it is right up there in terms of the issues they're most concerned about. It may not be the issue that the mainstream media is talking about on a regular basis, but it is of concern. And as far as Priti Patel is concerned, well, she has said that she wants to make it unviable, this route. She wants to stop the flow of illegal migration into the UK in this manner. But really, without the full cooperation of the French, remember the French have as well to guard a couple of 100 miles of their coastline where these boats can be sent off into the English Channel from. It's difficult. It's difficult for the French, as I say, to guard all of their coastline, and it's difficult really without the French stopping them coming in the first place for the British to do much more than picking them up. The Home Secretary has been talking about a pushback policy, but that's only going to work in a very small number of cases because they don't want to push back boats that are too flimsy, that may be overpacked with people that may have women and children.
And of course, questions about whether it breaks international law and so on. Mark, thank you very much indeed. Mark White there, our Home Affairs and Security Editor. And Mark will be keeping across that story in the days to come. We're going to pause, though, on the briefing for a moment or two. Up next, we'll be talking about vaccine passports that have been extended in Wales. Talk that they could also be extended in Scotland too. Of course, they're not off the table here in England. We'll be debating that issue and also hearing from the Lib Dem Scottish leader at COP. But first, let's get all the news on this Wednesday afternoon, just after 3:30. Here's Paula Middlehurst.
Very good afternoon to you. Your latest GB News headlines this hour. A survivor of child sexual exploitation is calling for the resignations of the Rotherham Council leader and the South Yorkshire Police and Crime Commissioner. It comes after GB News revealed up to 1,600 risk assessments have been carried out on children considered vulnerable to grooming since 2017. The pictures you're looking at, Sir Geoffrey Cox says he doesn't believe he's broken parliamentary rules after he was accused of using his MP's office to carry out private work for the British Virgin Islands inquiry. Labour is calling for a standards investigation, with the Deputy Leader Angela Rayner saying his actions appear to be a brazen breach of the rules. And Lord Frost has told Parliament Europe should stay calm and keep things in proportion in the row over the Northern Ireland Protocol. But the Brexit minister reassured the House of Lords he wouldn't give up on the process until it's abundantly clear that nothing more could be done. And the Prime Minister has returned to COP26 in Glasgow, where negotiators from nearly 200 countries are scrutinising a first draft of the COP26 agreement. The paper, published this morning, is urging nations to revisit and strengthen their emissions targets for 2030 so that global warming is limited to that ideal 1.5 degrees Celsius. And Elton John, pictured there, has been honoured by the Prince of Wales for his career in music and campaigning work on AIDS. The musician received the Order of the Companions of Honour. Sir David Attenborough and Dame Judi Dench also received the award. You're bang up to date. I'll be back in half an hour.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Very good afternoon and welcome back to the programme. Now, the Israeli ambassador was escorted from a London university campus last night at speed and with heavy police protection after addressing a meeting with students being widely condemned, including by the Home Secretary Priti Patel, who's given support to a police investigation into the protests outside the London School of Economics. She said she was disgusted by the treatment of the Israeli ambassador to the LSE last night. Anti-Semitism has no place in our universities or our country. I will continue to do everything possible to keep the Jewish community safe from intimidation, harassment and abuse. Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, also weighed in, saying that we believe in Britain, we believe in freedom of speech. The treatment of the Israeli ambassador last night and the attempt to silence her was unacceptable. Joining me now to discuss this is Gideon Falter. He's Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I've got no doubt, Gideon, you would of course join the condemnation that we've seen from government ministers of what happened last night. Some today suggesting, even though clearly the scenes were actually kind of quite upsetting in many regards, that it is legitimate to protest when it comes to kind of political issues like this.
It is definitely legitimate to protest. What it's not legitimate to do is chant anti-Semitic songs, go on social media and say that anybody who smashes windows gets pints, let's effing frighten her, we're storming in, let's make her shake. These are the messages that students were posting on social media. And of course, it culminated in the scenes where The ambassador had to be escorted out of the building under heavy police guard with her security team, bundled into a car and driven away because it seemed that LSE students, a large mob of them, some say about 500 people, were trying to crash through police and get to her. That is not debate. That is intimidation. It's anti-Semitism in the chanting particularly, and it's incitement to violence and criminal damage with the online posts that we saw.
And we've been here before, haven't we?
LSE's got a terrible reputation. You're absolutely right.
I didn't just mean at the LSE.
Other universities. At LSE, in the Jewish community, people have started to nickname it the London School of Extremism. It's really disturbing.
I didn't just mean at the LSE. I meant in terms of threat and kind of quite vociferous, I will put it, protests against the Israeli ambassador in different parts of the country, it must be said.
Well, look, if people want to protest, if people want to debate, that's what we've got the right to do in this country. But we don't have the right to be anti-Semitic, to incite violence, and to then go and try and hound people out of buildings, which is what it seemed that the mob outside was trying to do. And two things really need to happen here. We need to see from the London School of Economics, which has adopted the international definition of anti-Semitism, we need to see them now discipline the students who were involved, and that will, of course, involve identifying them. And we need them to work with the police to make sure that anybody they identify gets reported to the police. And we need to see these arrests materializing because the police were there in large numbers. They must have some idea who some of the perpetrators and ringleaders were. And we would like to see these people brought to justice and face the consequences of their actions, because otherwise this kind of thing is just going to get worse and worse.
Have we in recent years, of course, many Jewish people saying that actually they now don't necessarily feel safe in Britain, which is a terrible place to be in. And of course, we did see protests in the summer as well. Though there is a sense, I think, among some communities that they do want to legitimately protest against some of the actions of the Israeli government. We know the ambassador is a former, I think, Minister for Settlements. And it's, you know, in many ways, it's that difficult thing where actually many of these protests then cross the line, if you like, when it comes to protesting against the Israeli state, but then stepping into anti-Semitism.
Well, I'd like to make a couple of things very clear. First of all, you can criticize Israel as much as you like without being anti-Semitic. It becomes anti-Semitic, however, when you start chanting anti-Semitic chants, as these students were doing, when you start inciting violence. So these sorts of things are not just debate, it's not just criticism. That is something which is, in my view, a criminal matter and needs to be investigated and treated as such. The other thing that I think we need to look at is how Jews feel about these things, because every time this supposedly anti-Israel mob turns out, we see amongst them, as we saw in May this year, anti-Semitic placards, anti-Semitic chants, people accusing Jews of all sorts of things, and they take it out in the most abusive way against Jews. And that tells me that these are not people who are merely anti-Israel or critics of Israel. These are people who are haters of Jews. And for a long time now, British Jews have been feeling increasingly intimidated by these sorts of tactics that we see. We did polling, which we reported on at the end of last year, which showed that I think 83% of British Jews now feel that the tactics used by these people are becoming intimidatory. And we need to see action against this. We've seen the Home Secretary condemn this. That's absolutely right. But what we need to see is police action now and prosecutions. We need to see people put in the dock and face the consequences of their actions.
Gideon, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts this afternoon. It's Gideon Falter there, the Chief Executive of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, about those protests we saw outside the London School of Economics last night. Now, let's move on, because if you're hoping to visit a cinema, concert hall, a theatre in Wales, you're going to have to prove that you've had 2 vaccine doses, a negative lateral flow test, or have recently had the virus from this coming Monday. Welsh politicians voted to expand the current COVID pass scheme last night, with 39 for and just 15 against. In a moment, we'll speak to one of those who did vote against the measure. But first, our Welsh reporter, Lily Hewitson, has a report with the details on how this change is going to come into place on Monday.
So members of the Senedd have voted and it's passed 39 votes to 15. Quite the difference to the last vote that we saw in the chamber on the COVID passes just a few weeks ago. Protesters gathered here on the steps of the Senedd earlier on this evening. They have now progressed down to the entrance of T Howell. Here's what happened this evening. Awaiting the decision, hundreds of people gathered outside the Senedd on Tuesday evening, waiting to hear if it will become law to show the NHS COVID pass in theatres, cinemas and concert halls in Wales from Monday. It was pretty certain that the vote would pass. It was understood that Plaid Cymru would back Labour ministers on the decision, and that's exactly what happened. The two parties are currently negotiating a cooperation deal, but not forming a formal coalition. The Tories and the Lib Dems voted against the law, but it was a strong majority, 39 votes to 15. So now from Monday, if you live in Wales or you're just visiting, if you're going to the cinema, a theatre or a concert hall, you'll now have to show the NHS COVID pass on entry.
Because I feel that the COVID ID health passport scheme does not support any kind of benefit into stopping COVID or spreading COVID. It's literally controlling people's movements. If the whole idea of the COVID ID passport or the health passport is to limit the numbers and help protect people, what he's basically saying there alone is counterproductive to everything that we've been told. And I have not seen any scientific evidence that the health passport alone, even on that, limits the spread of COVID-19. The reason also I'm here is because I feel that once we get the expansion on, say, cinemas and theatres and wherever else they're going, it's going to be pubs, clubs, restaurants, and then shops, supermarkets. You know, either get a jab or get a vaccine, or you can't go into these places. These vital services, you know, like supermarkets and food centres and things like that. And if it's not based on any scientific evidence that this is all done to protect you, I mean, what are you doing it for? It's forcing obligation, it's coercion, and that goes against so many laws that we have in this country.
Following the vote, Welsh Government Minister for Health and Social Services, Eluned Morgan, said on the extension of the COVID passes, the decision to introduce them has not been taken lightly, and the venues that will be covered are indoors and see large numbers of people being closely together for prolonged periods of time.
OK, that was Lily Hewison reporting there on the latest developments in Wales. Let's speak to James Evans. He's the Welsh Conservative Senate member for Brecon and Radfordshire and joins us now live. Good afternoon to you, James. And we're going to be speaking to Silky Carla, who's the director of Big Brother Watch, who is in the studio with me as well. But first, James, why did you vote against this?
I vote against this, Darren, because number one, this is going to create a two-tiered society. I have not been shown any evidence by the Welsh government or the UK government that vaccine passes or passports work. The UK government's own scientific advisors of SAGE have said that vaccine passports will not have any effect of reducing the virus. The Welsh government's own technical advisory cell have said the same thing, that vaccine passes will have a limited effect on the virus. We know that vaccine passes do not stop people getting COVID. And the problem is an unvaccinated healthy person without COVID will now be denied access to nightclubs and cinemas, with somebody who has got a vaccine pass, who hasn't actually tested, who has COVID, will be allowed into those events. That's just not good enough. We're creating that two-tiered society. It's not conservative. We're pro-choice. And that is why I voted against this yesterday.
How, James, is it two-tier? Because as far as I understand, it's you just have to get a test, have had the virus, or had a vaccine. I mean, that's literally everyone can do that. If you haven't had the vaccine, you just do a test. I don't understand how it's two-tiered.
Well, it is two-tiered because what you're creating is the vaxxed and the unvaxxed in our country, and you are going to have people who do not want to get vaccinated, who are going to be excluded from vast parts of our society.
But they're not though, because you just have to do a test. They're not creating a two-tier society. It's open to everyone. It's not excluding anyone. I don't see how it is.
If you want to have a test, that's absolutely fine. That is your choice. But to deny people who theoretically don't want to do a test access to those events. Some of these places have put that on record. You have to do that anyway. But as I've said, it's about choice. I'm double vaccinated, but that's a choice I made to protect myself. If others don't want to do that, that's up to them, and they should not be asked to provide any of their medical information to go into an event or venue. I just do not think that's right. It's not conservative, and that is why I voted against these vaccine passes in Wales.
Silky, what do you think?
Well, we've just launched a legal challenge against vaccine passports in Wales because they are unevidenced, as James said, and incredibly invasive. And already we've seen, despite the fact that the policy is clearly failing, we can see that it's being expanded. The policy is actually being expanded within days now to cinemas, theatres. We're just at the beginning of this, so we're very concerned about where this might go and what's happening to medical privacy across the UK, to be honest with you.
How is doing a test an invasion of your medical privacy?
Well, it's not necessarily about doing a test, but it's about having to show medical papers to do everyday things, like taking your kids to the sport or going to a cinema or going to a nightclub, for instance. When what we can see is that there is no evidence base for this. For most people, and I think what perhaps James was trying to say, for most people, these COVID passes are vaccine passports because most of the population is vaccinated. So we are having to divulge very sensitive information to bouncers and bosses, and now entering a world in which you might lose your job if you don't have the right papers. You could be a perfectly healthy person and you could be looking at an economic destitution, social exclusion, just because you're not presenting the right papers. I think for a lot of people, it goes against the British sentiment. And we're very worried about what kind of country we could be becoming.
James, you said earlier it's deeply unconservative, I think you said. God, you must be flipping angry with your own government in Westminster, who haven't ruled it out. Far from it, they keep suggesting it's very much on the table.
Well, that's why my colleagues and I in the Welsh Conservatives have said we do not believe in any mandatory vaccines or having to have a vaccine to do your job. That's just simply not right. I don't agree with that. I'm a true Conservative about pro-choice, and I don't agree currently with the position that the UK government is taking. That's why in Wales we are taking a different line to the UK government in Westminster to say that we believe in pro-choice, and we do not believe that people should have to provide vaccine passports, and we do not believe that anybody should have to have to take the vaccine to have to carry out their job. It's deeply unconservative. It's not what I stood on the manifesto pledge to do, and I can assure you, the people who are listening to this programme, that I am one of those Conservatives who will fight this because I don't think it's right, it's not British, and it's simply not conservative.
James there, Silky, says it's not British, but it's certainly European. You know, if you go to Ireland, go to France, I've just come back from holiday from Greece. It's pretty universal, actually, across most of Europe now. In fact, actually, England is an outlier in this. Why are they all wrong and kind of the government at the moment in England's got it right?
Well, we're seeing all types of different approaches from around the world, and there are lots of European countries that have used this, and in quite a centralised way, it has to be said. And, you know, we're not part of the European Union, and to be honest with you, I think some of the reasons that some people were Eurosceptic is because...
Well, of course, this got nothing to do with the European Union. This is up to individual member states who've done it on their own autonomy. It's got nothing to do with the EU.
Oh, but there is an EU-wide push for this kind of a scheme, and it is quite worrying when you think about what would happen if you have across the whole of Europe this kind of medical restriction in this way. So we don't have that. We have to do things, and I think the whole point of this government, we thought, was to do things in our own way. I'm fascinated to hear that this is unconservative. I mean, I think we're non-partisan, but as looking at it objectively, of course it's unconservative. But as you say, that's not what we're seeing from this government. And in fact, not only because we've now got vaccine mandates in the NHS for care workers, but this whole push for a COVID pass scheme has come from the Conservative government, who also lied for months about the development of the scheme before now handing it over to Mark Drakeford in Wales. But also, it has to be said, the reason that there are now COVID passes in Wales is, I'm afraid, because Gareth Davies, a Conservative Senedd member, didn't turn up to the vote. And on the numbers, the vote should have actually been lost on COVID passes, and there shouldn't be COVID passes in Wales.
James, we'll give you the last word. You've got 30 seconds.
Thanks, Darren. No, as I said, my colleagues and I in the Welsh Conservatives are totally opposed to any vaccine passes, and we will do all we can to oppose this going into our hospitality sector, because we need to be building back our economy now. We're not holding it back, and that is why we will be opposing vaccine passes right the way across the country.
James, really appreciate your views. That's James Evans there joining us from Wales. He's the Welsh Conservative Senate member. And Silky, thank you very much indeed. Silky Carlo, Director of Big Brother Watch. As you say, it's going to be a debate that's going to carry on clearly for months to come. I think Scotland are talking about potentially extending their COVID vaccine scheme. I was in Glasgow last weekend going to the theatre and did have to show it. So it is an interesting debate. I know it's one that you want to get involved in as well. As always, you can email us here at gbviews@gbnews.uk or do tweet me at GBNews, and we'll keep across what you think of the decisions that have been made in Cardiff, Edinburgh, London and Belfast. But that is it from me for today. I'm back again at 3 tomorrow. Tom is live from Glasgow at 9, Gloria at 12. Up next, it's Alex Phillips with the afternoon agenda and that Boris Johnson press conference. Stay tuned.
Hello again. Most will have a dry day tomorrow. A fairly grey start, some thick fog in places, but it should clear and generally skies brightening up before things then turn wet and windy tomorrow night and on Friday. Now that is going to come courtesy of this area of low pressure developing at the moment out in the Atlantic. But ahead of that, we've got a couple of weak weather fronts, one continuing to bring damp and drizzly conditions to the evening over South Wales and parts of the Midlands, and another one bringing some showery rain across northern Scotland, where it's also very blustery. Elsewhere, though, the winds are light, and that will allow some mist and fog patches to form, particularly over parts of northern England and North Wales. A bit of a chilly one across northern Britain. A touch of frost is just about possible in rural areas, but we're a long way from a frost in the south. A mild start to Armistice Day here. It will be a fairly grey start, however. Now, there will be a little bit of showery rain here and there through the day, mostly in parts of the west, but many places will stay dry, and we should see some brightening of the skies, particularly in the east, a bit of sunshine as possible. The breeze will be picking up in the west, and it is still fairly mild, with temperatures in places getting into the mid-teens. It's through the evening we'll start to see significant change as wet and windy weather sweeps initially across Northern Ireland, then into western Scotland, and then these bands of rain will sweep across most areas during the course of Friday. The winds are picking up all the time as well. You can see that low pressure there, the swirl with the wind and the rain. Parts of the east may not see too much in the way of rainfall, but there will eventually be showers across all parts. And southern Scotland, northern England, North Wales look like being particularly wet on Friday, along with the Northern Isles. And it will be blustery wherever you are. That low pressure then bringing a wet and windy spell for Friday, but it tends to ease off and things turn drier as we go through the weekend. Bye for now.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.